Hi guys, it was about 22 years ago that I sat down with an older lady who was attending one of our classes. And I asked her, what are you doing here? What are you trying to learn? And she goes, I want to make sure that what just happened to me never happens again. It's one of those conversations that kind of sits in your head and ferments over the many years and becomes larger than life. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, click the bell notification icon so you know when a new video is uploaded. Tax laws are changing all the time. The laws are changing all the time. That's why you're first to know, you're first to grow. In this particular situation, this gal, and I don't remember her first name, but she was about the age of my mother. So she'd be at the time, she was probably in her 60s to early 70s. And she had properties going down the East Coast into Florida. She had multiple single family residences. I think she had 13, and she had 2 commercial. One of those commercial properties was in Florida, and it had 2 stories, and she had a property manager, pretty wise lady. She had a good accountant. She said she had good attorneys. She had lots of insurance on the properties. And at the time, they said, don't worry about those LLCs. They just create more tax complexity, which of course we now know is not the truth. But at the time, LLCs were not accepted in all jurisdictions. They were still relatively new. So she owned all of her properties, including her home, in her personal name. Yes, banks still allowed it back then. Now with commercial property, you're going to have a bank arguing with you to make sure that it goes into an LLC. But at the time, this is what she did. She hired a couple of window washers. They were licensed and bonded. And I should say she didn't. Her manager hired it. But of course, she's the owner of the property, so it's considered her. And these 2 individuals came in and started doing the window washing, and they used an aluminum ladder and they touched an electric line. The gentleman that was on the ladder actually made connection. I believe it was the pole to the actual ladder, started the current, and he was electrocuted. And unlike the movies where somebody flies off with the hair smoking, he just started to shake, and the other individual down below went to go save his buddy and never left the ground. As soon as he put his hand on the ladder, electrocuted him. So she had 2 wrongful deaths. Now, of course, she has tons of insurance, right? Wrong. The individuals had allowed their license to lapse. So it was something that was not going to be covered by the insurance company. In fact, they denied liability because they said this is actually an exception underneath the policy. You need to hire licensed and bonded contractors. Therefore, we're not going to pay out. So the lawyers said, hey, there's massive damages. We're going to go ahead and consent to a large amount of the damages, and we'll let them go ahead and foreclose on that piece of property, wrongfully thinking that that would be all that happened. If anybody's here has been to a foreclosure sale, you know they don't get full dollars on the sale. In fact, it's usually just enough to pay off the first and the sheriff's sale. There's the costs of the person actually holding the foreclosure. And that's exactly what occurred here. The way she described it is she said her properties started falling over like dominoes. They sold the first one, went to the second one, foreclosed on that one, went to the next one, foreclosed on that one, went to the next one. And each time the expenses got bigger and the amount that was going to pay down that judgment was less and less. And they ended at her house. She didn't even have a full homestead on her house. They actually took the house away as well. And so she lost all of her real estate over one incident. Now, that brings us to the major question of today, which is why do real estate investors use LLCs? And here's the easiest answer I can give you, is because it prevents situations like that from ever occurring to you. And this is how it works. There are 2 types of liabilities in real estate. There's the property itself, and I don't care whether it's a single family house or it's a commercial building. There's liability from that structure, period. Somebody could fall on it. You could have environmental claims. You could have anything going on that piece of property. You as the owner could ultimately be held responsible. And so that's called inside liability. Inside is meaning, hey, it's inside of something. We are going to place that within a box. In that box is what you would call a limited liability company. And what this is, it's a state entity. We pay the state a fee and they say, fantastic. Anything that happens inside that box stays inside that box with very few exceptions. If you're committing criminal acts, fraud, or some other, they may have a few, depending on the state that you're in. There'll be a list of things where they say, we're not going to cover you. But for the most part, if you're in real estate, it's going to cover you if you're engaged in traditional real estate investing. That's why by far and away, the LLCs are what everybody uses. It stays inside. The other aspect is me out here. And let's say that I crash into somebody in my car and they sue me. They go, hey, Toby, I'm going to come after you. And they sue me. Eventually, I run out of stuff to take. They want my LLC. This is called outside liability. An outside liability is where it really pays to have an attorney who knows what you are doing and how to affect and prevent that from ever getting to your real estate. There are states that prevent outside liability that anybody can use. Anybody can use, even if you don't live in them. You can actually create an LLC in that particular jurisdiction and ultimately get coverage. Now, it may not look exactly like this. We have the property isolated, and then we need to have something between you and that property. We may have that property held again in an LLC, but maybe it's a Wyoming LLC or a Nevada LLC where we take our interest and we just have it held there. Then I'm no longer worried about them taking this one. They're going to have to deal with Wyoming, and Wyoming has the strongest laws in the land. It will not allow them to take that company away. We'll get into that on another day, but they will not allow them to take away my entity. They cannot take it. They cannot foreclose on it. They cannot take it away from me and hand it to somebody else. The courts can't do that. The most they could get is a lien against that entity, which allows me to keep control of this property in this particular LLC. That's what I want, is to remain in control. That allows me to force reasonable settlements and to make liabilities go away much quicker. Now, that's reason number one, LLCs are used in real estate. Reason number two, they're used in real estate far more than everything else, is that this LLC right here, we can tell the IRS how we want it to be treated from a tax standpoint. They are the most effective entities from a tax standpoint because, frankly, we could tell the IRS that we want them to ignore it. We could tell the IRS we want them to treat it as a partnership. We could even tell the IRS we want them to treat it as an S Corp or a C Corp or a trust. You name it, that LLC can do whatever, it can warp into whatever it wants to be from a tax standpoint. If I set up something like this, I may have lots of properties that are being pointed at a single LLC that's held in Wyoming. I may have 20 properties all over the place, and they're all pointed over here, going back to this Wyoming. I could ignore all of these for tax purposes. In other words, I could file one single tax return and have it go onto my return, or I could actually have this ignored too and just have it go onto my Schedule E. So for folks that are going, whoa, I have 20 LLCs, that's 20 tax returns, that's really going to be expensive. You don't have to do that. You do not have to do that. You could actually have 0 tax returns and just file them all on your Schedule E. Or more often than not, I'll just tell you, we'll probably have this as a partnership so that there's at least a tax return capturing this and keeping it off of your return. We'll put it on your page 2 of your Schedule E. It makes it a lot cleaner. And especially if you're going to sell one of these properties, then we may be filing a tax return for it. But you get to choose. That's why real estate investors love LLCs. In fact, I've been doing this for quite a bit, for a couple of decades more. For the last decade, everybody's been using the LLCs for real estate. That is by far and away the number one entity. The only time I see other things than LLCs for real estate is if you are developing or a dealer in real estate. You're flipping houses. Then I'll sometimes see an S Corp or a C Corp show up. But more often than not, again, it will be an LLC taxed as an S Corp, an LLC taxed as a C Corp. I can choose whatever flavor I want it to be. That's why they are so versatile. In fact, we sometimes joke, we say it's like a Swiss Army entity. You can pick, do I want the spoon or do I want the little knife thing, right? If you have a Swiss Army knife, you know what I'm talking about. It can be just about anything I want it to be. They are such an effective tool. And again, that's why real estate investors use them. The other type of entity that you'll see with these that marries perfectly with it, better than just about anything else, is when you use a land trust to own the real estate and point it to an LLC. That's a topic for another day. But if I was just going to answer the question is why are LLCs so popular in real estate? This is why, is that you could literally have a single state entity and choose how you want it to be treated for a specific activity. And I could use the same type of LLC over and over and over again. And I could just change this tax designation depending on whether I'm developing a property, flipping a property. Maybe I'm wholesaling properties. Maybe I'm a real estate agent. Maybe I am just I'm buying and holding apartment building, commercial property, single family residence. All of those, I could start with an LLC and then determine how I want it to be treated from a tax standpoint and get to where I need to go. There's nothing else out there like it. And that is why the people that really know real estate, they all use limited liability companies.